Do we want to do this now? We were going to do it in the post game. Let's do it now.
I think you should
Why
do
not?
it now, yeah.
Okay. And this is partially what I'm talking about here. Then this is relevant. I don't actually talk about Jimmy Dore much on this show. I talked about him once a couple months ago because he was passive aggressively saying some stuff about a panel I was on. And someone brought this video to my attention, though, and I'm stunned, honestly, because I would at least want to give Jimmy credit. I've seen him saying, hey, well, you should question the official he says question the official narrative in Syria in ways that are totally wrong, stupid, conspiratorial, and overlook war crimes. But I don't know, overlook official narratives in Venezuela, which for all my immense criticisms of Maduro, I think is extremely important. We always need to look at the U.S. hand in Venezuela and, of course, in attacking the left across Latin America. I haven't seen Jimmy say anything about Brazil, but apparently he put this video out a year ago. If you notice something, this video starts in the middle of basically an infomercial for the lawyers who did the car wash investigation, which ended with Lula being put in prison. Let's play this.
Lava Jato, it's okay for no corruption.
Lava Jato has become a work of art itself, with broad support of the public. Lava Jato bumper stickers are everywhere. Judge Moro has become a folk hero, and Delton has a best-selling book on the operation.
I wrote this book to say that we are not heroes in this case, and car wash case is only the first step.
Lava Jato is an attitude in Brazil now. It's a ray of hope, and it's an example for young prosecutors, young judges, that they can make a difference. We hope that we have success in the legal procedures, but the success of changing the mindset is already happening.
We live in a window of opportunity for changes, and we are committed to use any chance, any possibility to make things better in Brazil. And doing so is a matter that is up to everybody.
Wow.
That's kind of, I don't know, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I want to get a Lava Jato t-shirt.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I really want one.
So Lava Jato, that's car wash, I guess, in whatever. They speak Spanish, but I think they speak Portuguese, right? Portuguese.
All right. I don't want to be too much of an asshole about the last part and overlook the actual point here. Okay. And this is what we mean by aimless, vague, depoliticized, quote-unquote, populism. What did car wash actually reveal? Well, car wash undoubtedly revealed massive corruption across Brazilian politics, although it was weaponized to target one party. A party, the Workers' Party, which is simply not designed purely as a patronage system for corruption. A lot of the other parties involved in it literally were. But I'm going to quote now from Brian Mayer of Brazil Wire. It's no secret that American corporations have immensely benefited from Operation Car Wash, the international corruption investigation that was initiated in partnership between the U.S. Department of Justice, the SEC, the local public prosecutor's office in Curitiba, Paraná, and the Brazilian External Police. American petroleum corporations such as ExxonMobil and Chevron are benefiting from the Michel Temer government's systemic dismantling and privatization. Temer is the right-wing vice president who stabbed Dilma Rousseff in the back, who has multiple corruption allegations against him, including ones that are infinitely more substantiated than anything presented about Lula. He's the current president of Brazil, implementing a vicious austerity plan, which has thrown millions back into poverty and is rolling back labor rights as part of this beautiful new mindset that car wash opened up in Brazil. The government's systemic dismantling and privatization at below market rates of Petrobras and its massive offshore oil reserves. And with MP 795, a law which will give $300 billion in tax abatements to foreign companies extracting Brazilian petroleum. Then goes on to talk about how Boeing and other companies benefit from this and how this connects to Hillary Clinton's support for the 2009 coup in Honduras. So that judge, Sergio Moro, who had the soft music under him in the clip, has been actually publicly castigated for leaking multiple recordings in an attempt to embarrass Worker Party members in illegally. Not supposed to do this outside of his remit. Several months ago, when one regional court judge ordered that Lula be released from prison, Sergio Moro refused to comply with the order in another act of illegality. Last weekend, he released another tape recording in an effort to hurt the Workers' Party, which now, as we know, is literally the only choice between fascism and democracy in Brazil. But I guess it's part of this new beautiful mindset. Briefly more from Brian Mayer. The following timeline is meant to further public understanding and relationship between the U.S. Department of Justice to 2016 and the political imprisonment of Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, which, as Glenn Greenwald points out, was obviously done to prevent him from running for the presidency this year, in a situation in which he is still the frontrunner in spite of being held in solitary confinement and illegally prevented from giving interviews for the past 4 months. So, my fucking suggestion is that you do a little bit of fucking area research. And you read a little bit about how actually Operation Car Wash was part of a right-wing fucking plan and strategy leveraged to defeat social democracy and labor unions and create a political prisoner in fucking Brazil. Or, I don't know, maybe we just want to be useful idiots for fascists globally.
Yeah, I would suggest that if someone's... I mean, not that fighting corruption's a bad thing, but if someone's suggesting that their fighting corruption is going to make life better for the average person on the street, and they're not talking anything about redistribution or things like that, then they're probably not somebody you should just trust because they have...
What is corruption?
Exactly.
Well, it's like, well, that's the question. Is like whenever you hear somebody talking about these kind of like general concepts, like, you know, like justice in the abstract, like the question you have to ask is justice for whom? And it's very clear who this service of justice has been benefiting, which has been the right wing, American corporations, and people who are political enemies of Lula. And
also it's been used actually to target left leaders across Latin America.
Without a doubt, yes.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you know, these things are definitely very targeted, and it's something that's, you know, we really need to make sure, especially people who are claim to be on the left, to be a little bit smarter about that, because this is something that has been used historically across the board, these kind of bold claims for these universal values or these, you know, systematic understandings, like we don't see these things as individual. Well, no, there are power structures behind all of these things, and it's important to recognize what is motivating, what is making these movements happen. And clearly what we can see in Brazil is that, you know, a popular democratically elected leader and then someone who's leading in the polls was prevented from taking power to give an opportunity to the right wing, which threw the entire Workers' Party into complete disarray.
Right. And look, and if you want to have a left critique of the Workers' Party, it's one of, you know, demobilization of their base and of making arrangements with existing corrupt orders, which is the fundamental problem of any oligarchic capitalist society. But this populism that has these generalized moral statements and vague complaints will be harnessed by the right wing. We literally see this in Italy. The Five Star Movement was a populist party, not left, not right. It had a fusion of some elements of pro-labor, environmental, anti-corporate order with some willingness to be very reactionary and racist on issues of immigration. They've partnered with the Northern League, a full fascist party, and guess who runs that show? Guess who's relevant in that government? That's how this shit works. And you listen to this soft music and all this nonsense. The upshot of that investigation is austerity, the selective use of corruption prosecutions, and paving a way for a guy who says the problem with the military dictatorship was that they tortured too many people and didn't kill enough. Yeah. While you're off just like, yeah, it's fucking corruption.
I mean, to see the game that's being played by some members of the Brazilian elite and Brazilian rich is really, really frightening. To say that you would play this kind of game with an absolute, like, authoritarian, thuggish person just to prevent some very moderate social democratic platforms from being implemented in Brazil. And, you know, there is a good leftist critique of the PT. And it's one of these things when you look at what happened in Brazil, you see that they're not like the elites aren't even willing to compromise on just like the most modest
Right.
of platforms, because that was the hope in Brazil, was that you could find some common ground and break through it. But they've been waiting to push this through, and now they have the opportunity, and it's very frightening. And no one on the left, nobody who calls himself a leftist, should take the position that what's happened to Lula is just. I'm sorry.
No, it's disgusting. And anytime some idiot is like, "Oh, so corruption's okay if it's on your side."
Even if everything that Lula is accused of doing is true,
yes,
right? There's no reason that he should be held in solitary confinement with limited visitation, right? There's no reason that he shouldn't be able to run for. There's no reason he should be in prison in the first place.
Period.
Right? And and there's certainly no reason that an entire democratic movement and party and structure should be torn down as punishment for that. That's not justice.
Theoretically, getting an apartment whose main evidence is based off of statements of a businessman keeping himself in jail is flimsy as hell. And yes, more broadly, yes, you know what? In a perfect daffodil-strewn world, Hillary Clinton wouldn't make tens of millions of dollars speaking to Wall Street, and Barack Obama wouldn't make tens of millions of dollars speaking to various corporate interests. And more seriously, former Congress people like Buck McCunin wouldn't be lobbying for Saudi Arabia to commit mass murder in Yemen. And maybe Lula da Silva wouldn't have an apartment. In fact, maybe Brazil, which spends the most after the United States on campaigns and has profoundly corrupted campaign finance laws, would have radically restructured campaign limits, which would also mean you have to break up all sorts of corporate cartels and oligarchies, which they made their peace with in order to win. And by the way, how was that covered in the Western press and the Brazilian press when they did it? Moderation, responsibility, and being shrewd. And now it's talked about as corruption. They could give Lula the whole fucking block. He listed 30, 40 million people out of poverty and is the Democratic choice for president. And if you don't get the fundamentals of what this is, you're too naive and you're too in your own whatever sort of elitist bubblegum comfort world to ever do any kind of politics. Because, this is, I don't know. Yeah. What if Bernie Sanders said so, what if he did inappropriately call some fucking college on behalf of his wife or whatever that silly thing they're trying to make out? What if he did that? People, including good people, sometimes do things that aren't great. And sometimes also people make compromises with pre-existing systems to deliver greater goods. And if you don't get that, I don't know. I hope we can kind of sort of time freeze you in a intro to ethics class in college for your life or eternity.
I mean, to complete the analogy, in that hypothetical situation with Bernie, the solution certainly wouldn't be throw Bernie in in prison in isolation and pull him off of the ballots across the country, right? I mean, like, that certainly would not be what we would want to happen.
By the way, if there was a Lava Jato and if that something like that exists in the United States, what top line politician you think goes to jail first? With the same political motives,
I would. This is an educated guess. I would say Collins, because she has enriched herself the most in her senatorial career out of any sitting senator today.
Ooh, yeah. I make that motherfucking bank, cash money, y'all.
No, I don't know that for sure, but
well, if it went by the Brazil case, it would be Bernie.
It'd be Bernie,
right? It's like
Bernie or Warren. The banks probably have like how many individuals do you think it's their main job to look at, like Elizabeth Warren for banks to try to take her down?
Tons, without a doubt. I mean, it's just that naive bullshit. Like, I can't fucking stand it. I mean, look, I get that it's like distasteful here to have to make a calculation where you vote for Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton sucks. But the same perfectionistic logic doesn't work in that election. But then you have, like, you're going to go out to Brazil, guy who's a fucking political prisoner and leader of democracy and labor rights movement. It's like, oh yeah, I wish we had some far right prosecutor whose wife is an oil industry employee, whose main upshot of his investigation has been the likelihood of a fascist getting elected. That would be great. I guess, granted, it happened last summer, so I guess Jimmy couldn't have predicted.
I voted for the candidate who had a Green New Deal, so I feel proud of myself about that, because you're saying that that's a great way to get out of this. I agree.
I guess it's like that's my equivalent of like Jimmy saying that like the Supreme Court didn't matter for Sam. That's how you get me on a bender.